If this doesn't chill you, nothing will. And before I tell you what the dog found in that well, subscribe to Shepherd and Soldier Stories, because some rescues begin with a growl, some with a gunshot, and some with one terrible decision made in the dark. Logan would later swear that if he had ignored Ranger for even 60 more seconds, he never would have seen the thing waiting below at all. The barking started before sunrise. Not playful barking. Not the short warning burst Ranger used for coyotes near the fence. This was deeper, harder, repeating with the same furious rhythm, like the old military dog had found something under the earth and had decided the earth itself was no longer allowed to hide it. Logan Cross opened his eyes and knew at once that sleep was over. Wind scraped dry weeds across the gravel lot. Then Ranger barked again, farther out this time, toward the back acres where one abandoned stone well sat in the middle of nowhere. Logan sat up. The old shoulder injury lit first. He rubbed once at the scar under his shirt, swung his boots down, and reached for the flashlight clip beside the bed. The barking didn't stop. That mattered. Ranger had been a dual-purpose military dog before Logan adopted him after the mission that broke both of them in different ways. The shepherd could go from silence to violence in a breath, but pointless noise was not in him. If he was still barking after the first minute, he wasn't trying to scare something away. He was trying to pull Logan somewhere. Logan stepped outside into hard pre-dawn cold. Dry washes. Bent fencing. Half-buried scrap. The dead shell of an old pump station. And beyond it all, the circular stone collar of the well sat in the earth like the mouth of something forgotten on purpose. Ranger stood beside it. The German shepherd's body was rigid, head low, tail level, front paws planted wide in the dust. He barked straight down into the dark center of the well, then swung around the stone ring once and barked again, even harder. "Ranger!" The dog didn't look back. Ranger barked, stopped, growled, then barked again. Logan felt the old internal shift happen before he wanted it. The quiet man who fixed engines for cash and kept to himself stepped back. The former SEAL stepped forward, the one who measured distance without thinking, scanned blind angles automatically, and hated that some parts of training never died. He slowed 5 yards from the well and studied everything around it first. The weeds closest to the stone ring were crushed. The dirt on the north side looked disturbed, and something dark hung on one jagged edge of rock near the rim. Logan crouched. Fabric. A torn strip of black material caught against the stone. Synthetic weave. Something heavier. Tactical. He rubbed it between thumb and finger and felt the same cold certainty settle into his chest that always came before bad decisions. Logan swept the flashlight around the ground. At first, all he saw were Ranger's prints and the cracked dirt. Then the beam caught a partial boot impression on the west side of the well. Deep heel. Aggressive tread. Not his. A faint dragged line ran away from it through the dust as if someone had carried weight or lost balance at the wrong second. He moved around the well in a half circle, checking the perimeter. More prints. At least 2 sets, maybe 3. One track came in from the service road. Another left toward the dry wash. The third looked broken, overlapping the others. Somebody had moved fast here. Somebody else had struggled. Ranger stopped barking and went dead silent. That frightened Logan more than the noise had. The dog lowered his head until his nose nearly touched the stone rim and looked down into the well with a rigid dread Logan had only seen once before, on a mountain road overseas when Ranger had alerted on an ID buried under loose gravel 5 steps ahead of a convoy. Logan's pulse changed. He moved to the rim and looked down. At first, he saw almost nothing. The well was deeper than he remembered, a cylinder of old-cut stone dropping into shadow with iron rungs fixed into one side. Dry. No water. No glimmer. Then the light found something that shouldn't have been there. 10 feet below the rim, one rung had been snapped and bent inward. 15 feet down, the wall widened slightly where old repairs had been done. And farther below, metal. A flat rust-dark surface curved across the bottom of the shaft where earth should have been. Logan adjusted the beam, and the light slid over a squared corner, a vertical seam, and a rib panel edge buried in dust. A shipping container. He stared down and felt the world narrow around that one impossible fact. A steel container had been buried at the bottom of the well. Not dropped there recently. Buried. Hidden under stone and time until only the shaft itself kept the secret. Ranger let out a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the rim into Logan's hands. Logan swung the beam over and saw why. The disturbed ground there wasn't random. Somebody had been digging at the outer base of the well. He found the tool half hidden in the weeds. Military folding and trenching tool. Mud still clinging to the blade. Nobody in this county buried a container under a dry well with military tools for a good reason. The wind shifted. A smell rose out of the shaft then. Stale metal, hot dust, old oil, and something else that made every nerve in Logan's body tighten at once. Bleach. Ranger barked straight down again, louder than before, then snapped his head toward the scrub ridge behind them. Logan turned instantly, dropping the flashlight beam low and wide. Nothing. Only mesquite skeletons, broken fence, and pale dirt running toward the service road. But the feeling stayed. Eyes on him. Wind. The dogs breathing. Then, a rock clicked once on the ridge, small but unmistakable, like a boot sole touching the wrong stone. Logan's hand went to the pistol under his jacket. "Show yourself!" No answer. Ranger barked at the ridge once, then swung back toward the well and barked twice more, furious, almost angry that Logan's attention had split when the real thing was still below them. That decided it. He clipped the flashlight between his teeth, tested the first iron rung with his boot, and started climbing down. The stone inside the shaft held the night cold. Dry grit flaked under his gloves. Every small sound magnified. The scrape of boots, his own breathing, Ranger pacing above, the faint metal tick from somewhere below. Fresh scrape marks. Boot heels had kicked here recently. Somebody had gone down in a hurry. Somebody had come back up with more trouble than they expected. Logan kept descending. The container roof came into full view around 20 feet down. Dark green once, now mostly rust and dust. Buried tight into the circular floor of the shaft. The doors faced upward at a slight angle, chained shut under welded rebar that had partly corroded away. One chain had been cut. Another hung slack. The left door sat open by less than an inch. Logan stopped on the last solid rung and stared. This had taken planning. Equipment. Men. Secrecy. Ranger barked from above. Logan stepped off the ladder onto the container roof. Dust shifted under his boots. The metal gave a dull hollow thump. He crouched beside the door's seam and ran the flashlight along the cut chain. Fresh grind marks shone silver under the rust. Whoever had opened this had done it recently. The bleach smell was stronger here. So was something else now. Wet cloth. Rot. Human confinement. Cold air flowed out across his face. Not underground cool. Machine cool. Artificial. Ranger started barking in a completely different tone. Not alert. Not threat. Urgency. Logan looked up toward the circle of dawn above and saw the dog silhouette at the rim, paws on the stone, body stretched forward so far he looked like he might jump. He turned back to the container doors. The gap had widened. It had been less than an inch. Now it was 2. The left door had shifted from the inside. Logan went absolutely still. No wind reached this far down. Nothing external had moved it. The door moved again. Just a tremor at first. Then a tiny, deliberate pull. His flashlight beam slid into the crack and found darkness, then a section of interior wall, then the edge of a strapped medical cot bolted to the floor. Before he could widen the angle, something pale moved through the slit fast enough to vanish. A hand. Human. Logan's breath stopped. Then, from inside the buried container, a voice rose through the narrow crack, weak, hoarse, and close enough to make the skin on his neck turn cold. "Please!" Ranger exploded into barking overhead. Logan dropped one hand to his pistol and the other to the steel door, but before he could pull it wider, another voice came from inside the container. Male. Calm. Too calm. "Don't open it unless you're ready to kill the man waiting above you." Logan froze. From the rim of the well, Ranger's bark turned savage. And a shadow crossed the circle of dawn. The shadow crossed the circle of dawn and vanished. Logan moved before the fear could become thought. He dropped flat against the shipping container roof, rolled to the hinged side of the half-open door, and brought his pistol up toward the rim. Dust scraped under his chest. The cold steel under him still held the shape of whatever this thing had once transported before somebody buried it at the bottom of a dead well and decided that was safer than daylight. Ranger's bark turned vicious above. Not warning, now challenged, then a man's voice came from the top of the well. "Back away from the doors." Logan angled the flashlight up just enough to cut a pale wedge through the shaft. He caught a glimpse of boots at the rim. Dark pants. One gloved hand. Not enough face. Whoever was up there knew exactly how to stay off angle. The calm male voice inside the container spoke again. "He's lying about only being one man." Everything changed. Logan kept his eyes on the rim. "Who are you?" The answer from inside came after a beat too long to be casual. "Open the door first." That made two people inside the container. Maybe more. Ranger barked again. Then a short choking snarl. Logan's voice dropped. "Ranger!" "Hold." The dog obeyed, but only barely. Logan could hear him pacing the rim in tight, furious turns, claws scraping stone, breath rough above the shaft. The voice from the rim came back, sharper now. "You don't know what you're standing on." He shifted his beam down into the slit between the doors. Inside, darkness first, then ribbed steel wall, then another cot bolted farther back, then a pair of knees on the floor. Bare, bruised, human. A woman. She crawled closer to the narrow opening, one eye finding the light through the crack. Hollow face. Tangled dark hair. Skin gone pale from too much artificial air and no sun. A black strap still hung from one wrist where someone had cut her loose too late. "Please," she whispered. "Open it before they gas it." Logan felt his pulse kick harder. "Gas it?" The male voice from deeper inside snapped. "Mira!" The woman flinched. Not fear of Logan. Fear of the man in the dark. The voice at the rim seized on the silence instantly. "She's manipulating you." The woman by the slit closed her eyes once and said, with exhausted hatred, "That's what they always say first." Logan shifted his weight toward the left door and tested it with his free hand. Heavy. Swollen. But not sealed. The cut chain hung slack enough to let the door move another few inches if he used force. Above him, gravel slid. A second pair of boots had entered the rim. The man inside had been right. More than one. Ranger exploded into barking so violent it slapped echoes down the shaft. Someone up top cursed. Another voice, different, lower, less disciplined, said, "Shoot the dog." Logan's whole body went cold. He swung the pistol up and fired toward the sound. The shot cracked through the shaft like thunder in a pipe. Stone chips rained down. Somebody above the rim shouted and dropped back. Ranger lunged with a snarl so savage it sounded almost human. Then the man inside the container said, very quietly, "Now they stop pretending." A shape moved in the darkness behind the woman. Tall. Broad. Controlled. The beam caught a jawline, part of a cheek, and one eye reflecting pale in the slit before the figure leaned out of the light again. Male. Injured maybe. Or simply careful. Logan kept his gun trained upward while talking downward. "How many inside?" The woman answered first. "3. The man in the dark corrected her immediately. "2 alive. 1 sedated." That phrasing hit wrong. Not a family buried by accident. A holding unit. Another shot snapped from above and smashed sparks off the iron rung inches from Logan's left shoulder. Ranger barked once, then the sound cut short into a heavy impact. Logan's head jerked up. "Ranger!" No answer. Then a growl. Then another impact, bodies colliding at the rim. He made the next choice too fast to regret it. He holstered the pistol, jammed the flashlight between his teeth, planted both boots against the right door, and pulled the left door hard with both hands. The metal screamed. Rust tore. Dust cascaded. Cold processed air burst from the widening seam across his face. The opening widened enough for the light to spill inside. Steel walls. Dual medical cots. A floor drain. A bolted locker. Clear tubing hanging from hooks. And in the back right corner, strapped to a narrow gurney with one arm still secured, lay a younger girl than he expected, maybe 12, maybe 13, blonde hair chopped short, eyes closed, chest rising in shallow chemical sleep. Sedated. The woman, Mira, crawled into the light and raised both empty hands. She looked mid-30s. Thin in the way long captivity makes a person seem carved instead of starved. Bruising ringed her throat and disappeared beneath the collar of a gray thermal shirt. Her lips were split. Her eyes were very awake. The man behind her remained in shadow for one more second. Then lightning flashed far above the well mouth, and the reflected white reached just deep enough into the container for Logan to see him properly. Not just broad. Military broad. Dark beard grown uneven. One side of the face marked by an old burn scar. Black utility layer cut away at the shoulder where dried blood had stiffened the fabric. Wrists marked by restrained abrasions. Eyes that belonged to someone who had once given orders in places where people died too fast to waste words. He stepped forward exactly far enough to be seen and no farther. "Name?" Logan asked. The man hesitated. Mira looked at him, then away. Too long. "Name," Logan repeated. "Dane." It came too cleanly. A metallic clink sounded from the rim above. Not stone. Not a boot. A pin. He recognized it before the memory fully arrived. Grenade. "Down!" He slammed the half-open container door inward as something dropped into the shaft from above. It struck the snapped iron rung, bounced once off stone, and clanged onto the container roof exactly where Logan had been lying seconds earlier. Flashbang. The well became pure white violence. Even with the steel door absorbing some of it, the shock hit like a fist through his skull. The flashlight went dead in his mouth. His ears rang. His vision smeared. He felt rather than saw Mira drop. The sleeping girl didn't move. The man calling himself Dane caught Logan by the jacket and dragged him fully inside as the container door rebounded half shut. Ranger's bark became a thin, distorted sound somewhere far above. Then gunfire. Multiple shooters at the rim, firing down blind into the shaft. Rounds punched sparks off the container roof. One tore through the upper door panel and zipped into the far wall. Mira screamed and flattened herself over the sedated girl. Logan forced one eye open through the ringing and shoved free of Dane's grip. The man didn't fight him. He pointed. At the rear wall. There, half hidden behind the bolted locker, was a recessed steel maintenance hatch cut into the back of the container. Not original shipping hardware. Added later. A second way out. Logan understood instantly. This container was not just buried storage. It was an access chamber. "To where?" he shouted, though he could barely hear his own voice. Dane's mouth moved once before the ringing let sense through. "Lower tunnel." Mira grabbed Logan's sleeve hard enough to hurt. "If they reach the rim controls, they'd flood this chamber." "What controls?" Dane answered. "The winch cage." Logan stared. Then he saw it. A thick cable running up through the ceiling corner. A brake housing bolted above the door. Track rails set into the side walls. This whole container could move. Lifted. Lowered. Hidden deeper. The structure around him reassembled itself in his mind at brutal speed. Dry well above. Shipping container camouflaged as debris below. Secondary hatch into some lower route. Armed men outside. Sedated child inside. A covert transfer point. Ranger barked again from above, louder now, angrier, still alive. Relief hit Logan hard enough to almost stagger him. Then the female voice came. Not from the people in the container. From a speaker hidden somewhere in the ceiling. Young. Cold. Precise. Containment note. Surface breach confirmed. Legacy canine pair still active. Do not damage the principal male. Every muscle in Logan's body locked. Principal male. Dane's face changed when he heard it. Not surprise. Recognition. Mira whispered, "No!" Logan looked from the hidden speaker to the fake maintenance hatch to the cut chain hanging from the door, and felt the shape of the Discovery starting to turn. "This isn't some random black site," he said. The speaker clicked once. Then the same female voice answered him with terrifying calm. "No," she said. "It was built for your line." Then the locks turned. The locks turned with the smooth certainty of something that had been waiting years to wake. Logan heard 3 separate mechanisms engage inside the buried container. One behind the rear maintenance hatch. One in the ceiling brake housing. And one somewhere below the steel floor, deep enough that he felt it through the soles of his boots before he understood what it meant. The whole chamber gave a tiny downward shudder. Mira let go of his sleeve as if the metal had burned her. Dane swore under his breath and moved to the rear hatch in one limping stride. He hit the recessed wheel with the heel of his hand, tested it, then looked back at Logan with the expression of a man watching a clock finally reach 0. "They've got remote control now," he said. Logan's hearing had almost settled after the flashbang, but every sound still seemed edged in tin and pressure. Gunfire from the well rim above came muffled now, irregular. Controlled? They were no longer shooting to kill blindly. They were holding the top and waiting for the machinery to do the rest. Ranger barked once. Then again. Still alive. That was the only good thing in the room. The female voice from the hidden speaker returned, closer now, as if the chamber itself had become her mouth. "Surface breach acknowledged. Principal male verified. Legacy pair remains intact. Begin descent." The steel cable in the ceiling jerked. Mira stumbled and grabbed the nearest cot. The entire container began to move. Not much at first. Just a slow sinking drag. Then another shudder. Dust sifted down from the frame seam. The cut chain on the half-open doors swung and clinked against the steel. The black square of dawn above the well mouth narrowed by half an inch as the chamber started lowering into whatever waited beneath it. Logan lunged for the door. Dane caught him by the jacket and slammed him back before his fingers could reach the gap. "Stop! My dog's up there. If you stick your head into that shaft now, you won't have one to bring back down." Logan almost hit him anyway. Then Ranger barked again, louder, closer to the rim than before, and was followed by a man screaming in pain. Not fear. Pain. The dog was still fighting. That was enough to stop the punch. Logan forced one breath through his teeth, then planted both hands on the half-open door and pulled. The chamber kept sinking. The door did not open farther. A new lock had caught outside the frame, pitting the steel against the rail. "Who are you people?" Dane looked at him, but not long enough to trust. "The wrong ones to leave in a transfer shaft." "That's not an answer. It's the best one you get while the floor is moving." The hidden speaker clicked. "You should be more grateful, Mr. Cross." The female voice again. Cool, measured, almost young enough to be less frightening, if not for the emptiness inside it. "We could have reset the chamber with all non-essential occupants still unsecured." Logan stared at the ceiling as if the speaker might reveal a face if he hated it hard enough. "Who are you?" A pause. Then, "Dr. Mara Vale, Continuity Supervisor." Mira shut her eyes. Dane did not move at all. The name landed in Logan's chest with the weight of a file he had never read but should have. Vale. Not a name he knew personally. A shape of one. The kind of name that circulates in redacted briefings without ever being spoken loudly in rooms with windows. The chamber sank another foot. The black of the well mouth above had almost become a lid now. Stone ring. Strip of dawn. Ranger silhouette pacing like a trapped shadow. Then even that vanished as iron shutters irised across the upper shaft with a heavy circular clang. Darkness swallowed the container. A row of recessed floor lights kicked on in response. Sterile white. Cold as surgery. Mira began shaking harder. The sedated girl on the cot stirred, but did not wake. Logan brought the flashlight back up, but the room no longer needed it. That somehow made everything worse. The chamber under clean white light looked less like an improvised prison and more like what it had always been. A designed intake cell disguised inside military salvage. The speaker hummed softly. "Mr. Cross, I recommend you stop resisting the obvious." Logan aimed his pistol at the ceiling grill. "What's obvious?" "That you were never the accidental variable." Dane muttered, "Here we go." Logan looked at him. "You know what she means?" Dane gave a humorless laugh. Enough to hate hearing it. The chamber shuddered again, then settled. No more dissent. A low magnetic thunk echoed through the rear wall. The maintenance hatch behind Dane had unlocked. He moved instantly, grabbing the recessed wheel and spinning it hard. This time the mechanism gave. The small steel hatch folded inward and let out a rush of colder air carrying concrete dust, old oil, and the distant electrical whine of industrial systems under load. Beyond it lay a narrow service tunnel. White walls. Pipe runs. Emergency strips pulsing at ankle height. And farther down, another locked door with a small black glass plate set beside it. Mira dragged herself up from the floor. "That wasn't open before." Dane answered without looking back. "Because we weren't the cargo before." That phrase hit Logan harder than he expected. "Not prisoners. Cargo." The speaker confirmed it. Descent complete. Barn shaft 1 now aligned with lower corridor intake. Principal mail transfer may proceed. Mira whispered, "No." Logan turned sharply. "Why no?" But before either prisoner could answer, the sedated girl on the cot started convulsing. Small at first. A hand. Then shoulders. Then a full-body spasm against the straps. Mira threw herself across the cot and checked the tubing running into the girl's elbow. "The dose is failing." "On what?" Logan asked. Mira didn't answer. She ripped the 4-line free instead. The girl gasped awake like she had surfaced from under black water. Blonde hair stuck to her face. Bruises ringed both wrists. Her eyes opened wide to the lights, the steel, the strangers, and then fixed on Logan with such raw recognition that he took one involuntary step back. "No," she whispered. Logan frowned. "Do I know you?" The girl recoiled into the cot straps and shook her head too fast. "They said you were later." Dane turned at that. So did Mira. Logan felt the entire room tighten around the sentence. What does that mean? No one answered, because the black glass plate at the end of the service tunnel lit up. A line of white text appeared on it. No trace, active paternal baseline candidate detected. Logan stared. Mira looked like she might be sick. Dane went utterly still. Then the black plate chimed and the locked door beyond it hissed once, not opening yet but preparing. The speaker's voice softened with something close to satisfaction. Interesting. Logan aimed the pistol at the tunnel. Start talking. Dane stepped between him and the service hatch before he could advance. If that reader gets your blood, this level changes. Changes how? Dane's scar pulled white around his mouth. Worse. The sedated girl, awake now, barely, stared at Logan as if his face had just confirmed a nightmare she'd been trying not to believe. Mira cupped the girl's jaw gently, checking her pupils with shaking fingers. What's her name? Logan demanded. Mira answered without looking up. Ivy. The girl whispered something so softly Logan almost missed it. Ranger. He turned. What? Ivy swallowed hard. They said the dog would know. No one moved. Not Mira. Not Dane. Not Logan. The speaker clicked again. Canine recognition marker confirmed, Dr. Maravale said. Advance the principal. Then the tunnel lights changed from white to blue. Dane's face emptied. Get down, he said. Logan didn't. The door at the far end of the service corridor blew inward from the other side, and armored men flooded the opening. All of them had rifles raised. All of them had rifles raised. The armored men flooded the opening in a disciplined burst, black helmets, sealed visors, compact carbines tied to the shoulder, moving like the narrow corridor belonged to them before any prisoner ever breathed in it. Logan fired first. The shot hit the lead operator square in the faceplate and snapped his head back, but the visor held. The man stumbled, dropped to one knee, and the second operator used his body as moving cover while bringing his own rifle up. Dane hit Logan from the side and drove him behind the rear service hatch wall, just as a controlled burst shredded the container interior. Metal screamed. White lights burst. The cot frame sparked. Mira threw herself over Ivy and took the spray of fragments across her back. Logan returned fire around the corner, 2 quick rounds, not to kill but to break their rhythm. One operator ducked. Another shifted left. That half-second was all Dane needed. He slammed the service hatch shut. Not fully. Half-latched. Just enough to choke the firing lane into a narrow slit. Rounds hammered the outer steel instead of flesh. The buried chamber rang with impacts so hard Logan felt them in his teeth. Ivy was crying now, not loudly, just the thin breathless sob of someone whose body had learned that volume invited punishment. Mira hissed through pain and pressed a hand to the back of her shoulder where shrapnel had cut through the thermal fabric. Blood spread dark under her fingers. Logan dropped beside her. Can you move? She nodded once, then shook her head as if even she didn't know whether she was lying. Dane was already at the hatch wheel again, checking the tunnel seam, the firing angle, the black glass reader at the far end, all while the operators outside kept striking the metal with controlled bursts and pressure tools. They're not trying to kill us, Logan said. Dane gave him a look sharp enough to cut skin. Not all of us. That landed. Logan looked at the black glass plate. No trace, active paternal baseline candidate detected. The words glowed colder than the chamber lights. What does paternal baseline mean? He asked. Ivy answered before either adult could stop her. It means they think you're his. The entire room turned toward her. She was trying to sit up now, one trembling hand clutching the cut strap at her wrist, blonde hair half across her face, eyes glassy from whatever sedation Mira had interrupted. But beneath the chemical confusion was something else. Recognition. Fear. Logan felt his pulse change again. His who? Ivy swallowed. Mira reached for her, but the girl pushed weakly past the hand. The father branch. The phrase made no sense, and too much sense at the same time. Dane swore under his breath. Great. Logan turned on him. Explain. Before Dane could answer, the hidden speaker came alive again. Dr. Mara Vale's voice was smoother now, almost pleased under the gunfire outside the service hatch. Subject Ivy, thank you. Continue cooperating, and your restraint classification may be reviewed. Ivy's face emptied instantly. She had spoken out of fear, not loyalty, and now regret hit her all at once. She folded inward on the cot and covered her mouth. Mira looked at the ceiling. Leave her alone. Mara ignored her. Principal candidate Logan Cross. You may still avoid the unpleasant version of this transfer. Step to the black glass panel in the tunnel. Place your palm against it. The outer team will hold their fire. Dane laughed once. No humor. That part's true. Logan kept his pistol trained on the hatch. And after that? After that, Mara said, the archive decides whether you are root or noise. The sentence punched some old locked door inside him. Root or noise? He did not know why those exact words felt familiar, only that they did. Not the meaning. The cadence. The shape. Another impact rocked the service hatch. Not gunfire this time. A breaching ram from the tunnel side. Dane backed away from the wheel. They're bringing it down. Logan moved instantly. He hooked one hand under Myra's arm and hauled her up. Can you walk? This corridor goes deeper, she whispered. That's not what I asked. Yes. Barely. Ivy slid off the cot and nearly crumpled when her legs hit the floor. Logan caught her before her head struck steel. The touch did something to the girl. She stiffened, eyes flying wide to his face. Don't, she whispered. He frowned. I'm helping you. No, she said, shaking harder. You don't understand. If the panel likes you, it opens the lower branch. That phrase froze Dane harder than the gunfire had. Logan heard it. Lower branch? The breaching ram hit the hatch again. The half-latch bit inward with a metallic shriek. Light from the tunnel slashed across the chamber floor. One rifle muzzle pushed through the gap and fired blind. Logan shot the barrel twice. The weapon vanished with a shouted curse. Dane grabbed the edge of the service hatch. Move now. Logan pulled Mira and Ivy toward the tunnel just as the hatch blew inward the rest of the way. Armored men surged the chamber. Not a clean line this time. They had to funnel through the narrow opening, stepping over bent metal and the ruined cot. The lead operator took one pace inside and ghosted. No, Logan corrected himself with a jolt. Ranger. Ranger. The girl had said the dog would know. And Logan's mind had corrected the name before he chose it. The operator's knee vanished under a black antenna blur. Ranger came through the upper shaft breach, like a piece of the world breaking loose. He hit the man from above with enough force to slam visor into steel. The chamber became teeth, shouting, and ricochet sparks all at once. The shepherd should not have been here. The upper shaft should have been sealed. But the dog had found a way down anyway. Logan didn't think. Ranger! The dog heard him through the chaos and snapped his head around for half a heartbeat. That was all the proof Logan needed. He knew this dog. Or the dog knew him. The realization hit so hard it almost slowed him down. Almost. The second operator recovered fast and swung the stock of his rifle into Ranger's ribs. The dog yelped, turned, and still kept his body between Logan and the guns. Dane fired the dropped sidearm from the first operator and took the second man through the throat seam. Mira shoved Ivy toward the tunnel wall. Run! They did. The service corridor beyond the container was narrower than Logan first thought, its white walls scarred by old scrape marks and fresh impact damage. Blue floor strips pulsed toward the black glass plate at the far door, like a path being drawn for blood. Behind them, Ranger snarls echoed with gunfire and metal impacts. Logan looked back once. The Shepherd had 2 operators pinned in a knot of limbs near the chamber threshold, while a third tried to drag a shock baton free. Dane was still in the room, half covering their escape. Logan shouted, "Dane! Go!" Mira stumbled. Ivy nearly fell with her. Logan caught both and drove them deeper into the corridor. The black glass plate brightened as they approached. No longer just white text now. A human outline. A palm print. Then a live prompt. Place hand to verify paternal root lower branch access will follow. Ivy saw it and started crying harder. Logan looked at Mira. "What's lower branch access?" She looked like someone being asked to describe a grave she had lived in. "Children," she whispered. "Storage. Rotation. The kept ones." His blood went cold. "And if I touch it?" Myra's eyes found his. "Then every lot below this level changes for you. That could help. It could also tell them exactly what you are." The corridor lights flickered. Then the speaker returned, closer than before. "You keep asking the wrong question, Logan," she said. He aimed at the ceiling grill. "Then fix that." A beat. Then her answer came, quiet enough to hurt. "The right question is why your dog descended a transfer shaft he was never trained to fear." Silence hit the corridor. Even the gunfire behind them seemed farther away for one brutal heartbeat. Logan looked at Ranger through the chamber chaos. The dog had stopped biting. He was standing over the downed operator now, chest heaving, staring past the men and straight at Logan with a grief-struck intensity that did not belong to random rescue or pure obedience. It belonged to memory. And before Logan could decide whether the fear moving through him was bigger than the operators, the archive, or the black glass waiting for his hand, the far door beyond the reader unlocked with a soft magnetic click. Then it began to slide open. Cold white vapor rolled through the winding seam. And from whatever waited beyond it, a child's voice rose out of the mist and said, with perfect calm, "He came back sooner than the file predicted." No one in the tunnel breathed. No one in the tunnel breathed. The child's voice had come from beyond the opening door with calm certainty, like an observation entered into a log. "He came back sooner than the file predicted." Cold white vapor rolled through the winding seam and wrapped around Logan's boots. The black glass panel beside the door still glowed with the palm print prompt. Behind him, the chamber crackled with impacts and Ranger's snarling violence. Ahead of him, something in the lower branch had recognized him before he had seen a single face. Mira grabbed Ivy's wrist. "Don't speak." Logan kept the pistol raised toward the opening. "Who's in there?" No answer. Just the slow widening of the door, the hiss of hidden mechanisms, and the chemical cold smell of underground air kept too clean for too long. Then the vapor shifted. A silhouette appeared in it. Small, child-sized, standing perfectly still. The light behind the figure was diffuse and wrong, softer than the harsh industrial white of the corridor, almost domestic. That made it worse. The child stepped forward just enough for Logan to see a narrow shoulder, a shaved or tightly cropped head, and the pale outline of bare feet against a clean floor. Not running. Not afraid. Waiting. Ivy whispered. "No!" Logan heard it. "You know them?" Ivy shook harder. "I know the room." That answer settled badly. The speaker clicked again. Dr. Mara Vale's voice had lost some of its cool. Just enough to hear pressure underneath it. "Variant records are not authorized to address the principal directly." The child beyond the door answered her without any visible fear. "You said he was unstable." A beat. You said the dog might reject him. Ranger barked once behind Logan. Then a body hit steel with a noise like a dropped locker. Dane shouted something from the chamber that Logan couldn't fully catch. The operators were still fighting to resecure the transfer cell, and every second Logan stayed in this corridor was another second the only people who seemed half honest were bleeding behind him. He edged forward. Mira caught his sleeve. Don't go in there blind. He didn't look back. Then stop making me. The silhouette inside the room tilted its head slightly, studying him with a patience that felt ancient in such a small body. The voice came again. A boy. Younger than Jonah had sounded in the shaft. Maybe 6. Maybe 7. You're taller than the image set. Logan's skin tightened. Image set? The child stepped into clearer view. A boy with pale skin and dark hair clipped close at the sides. Thin face. Hollow cheeks. Gray institutional shirt with one sleeve rolled up higher than the other. Black band around the wrist. On the left eyebrow, a small pale scar. Same place as Logan's. No resemblance would have hit cleanly after a night like this. The buried chamber, the files, the words paternal root, the way Ranger had dropped into the shaft as if following a memory instead of a scent, everything had already poisoned coincidence. So when Logan saw the scar, his mind didn't call it resemblance. It called it design. The boy's eyes moved from Logan's face to the dog behind him. And for the first time, emotion touched the child's expression. Not fear. Recognition. Ranger, he said softly. The shepherd went dead still. No growl. No bark. No warning. Just complete, terrible stillness. The corridor seemed to contract around that silence. Logan looked at the dog. You know him. Ranger's ears lowered by a fraction. He took one step forward, slow and uncertain, like a soldier approaching a grave he had expected never to see open again. Mira whispered, Oh God! The boy beyond the door looked not at Logan now, but at Ranger. They said you wouldn't remember either. Dane appeared in the service hatch then, blood on his sleeve, one captured carbine in hand. We have maybe 20 seconds, he said. He stopped when he saw the child in the room. His face emptied. What room is that? Logan asked, though he already knew it was the wrong question again. Dane answered anyway. Observation nursery. Nursery. The word landed like a slap. Logan looked inside. The room beyond the door came into focus now that the vapor had thinned. White floor, low bed, bolted toy shelf, one child's blanket folded with unnatural precision, camera dome in the corner, and along the far wall a whole spread of photographs behind transparent panels. Photographs of him. Logan in profile. Logan younger. Logan in uniform. Logan beside Ranger in a training yard. Logan carrying a black duffel after a mission he had spent years trying not to replay. He stopped breathing. The boy turned and followed Logan's stare with the quiet resignation of someone already used to being studied through other people's histories. They said it helps the branch stabilize, he said. Mira made a sound like she'd been punched. Logan's voice came out low and rough. What branch? This time the child answered without hesitation. Mine. The whole corridor changed shape around the word. Dr. Maraville cut in over the speaker, harder now. Subject Calder, step away from visual exposure. The boy didn't move. So now he had a name. Or a designation pretending to be one. Calder, Logan said. The child looked back at him and asked, Did they tell you which father you are yet? No one moved. Not Logan. Not Mira. Not Ivy. Not even Dane. The question did not belong in any normal world. It belonged exactly here. Behind them, the chamber fight changed pitch. Not more gunfire. Less. Shorter bursts. Commands now. Someone had taken control of the room. Ranger heard it too. His head snapped back toward the service hatch, then forward again toward Calder, as if both choices were wrong and the dog knew it. Dane made the choice for everyone. "We move. Now!" Logan pointed into the room. "Not without him." Mira caught his arm. "You don't know what he is." The boy answered that one himself. "I'm your early proof." The sentence hit harder than any weapon in the corridor. Ivy began crying soundlessly, shoulders shaking but voice trapped. Dane cursed under his breath and checked the corridor behind them. Blue floor strips were dimming one by one, which meant either power rerouting or doors about to cycle. "Proof of what?" Logan asked. Calder's eyes never left his face. "That they could make the dog stay a beat, even after they made the handler disappear." Ranger let out a small broken whine. That sound did something ugly inside Logan. The dog had spent years waking hard, freezing at chain clinks and medical clean smells. Logan had thought all of it came from war. What if Ranger had been trying to come back? The speaker crackled. "Containment note," Mara said, voice tight with something dangerously close to personal anger. "Principal male is becoming emotionally non-compliant." Advanced sedation sequence. Dane looked at the black glass plate and swore. The palm print prompt vanished. New text replaced it. "Primary male stable, initiate downline calming. Move." Dane barked. He shoved Mira and Ivy toward the nursery door. Logan grabbed Calder by the forearm before the boy could recoil and pulled him into the corridor. Calder stumbled once and then froze when Ranger came nose to nose with him. The dog didn't bite or bark. He just pressed his muzzle against the boy's chest and inhaled sharply, as if confirming something his body already knew and his mind had spent years losing. Calder's face broke. Not loudly. Just one crack in the mask. "I knew you'd know me," he whispered. Then the hallway vents opened. Thin slits along the white walls snapped wide. A sweet chemical smell flooded out at once. Ivy gagged. Mira threw a sleeve over the girl's mouth. Dane shattered the nearest vent grill, but 3 more had already opened farther down. "Sedative," he said. "Move." The nursery behind them changed too. One hidden panel in the back wall lit up with white text. "Emergency paternal reassignment available." Logan caught the words in one glance while dragging Calder and keeping the pistol trained toward the service hatch. "What does that mean?" Calder answered before Dane could. "It means if you die, they use the next one." The corridor went completely silent around that. Then several sets of heavy footsteps hit the far side of the nursery. A second door Logan hadn't seen at first, flush white in the back wall beyond the bed, began to unlock from the inside. Dane's voice dropped to the tone men use when panic is no longer efficient. "That room doesn't lead out," he said. Logan stared at him. "Then why open it?" Dane looked at Calder. Then at Ranger. Then back at Logan with the expression of a man who had just realized the deeper truth too late. "Because it leads to where they keep the originals." And the second door began to slide open. The second door began to slide open, and the nursery temperature dropped hard enough for Logan to feel it through his wet shirt. Cold white vapor spilled across the floor, rolling under the bed, and over the toy shelf, like breath from something stored rather than lived. Ranger moved instantly, stepping in front of Calder with his body low and rigid, ears forward, one paw lifting and setting down again as if the old military dog could not decide whether the thing behind that door was prey, threat, or memory. Mira dragged Ivy against the corridor wall and wrapped an arm over the girl's nose and mouth against the sedative leaking from the vents. The chemical sweetness had already thickened. Logan could taste it under the dust and old bleach. His lungs wanted to swallow less of it, but the body only knows that after the first breath is already inside. "What's in there?" he asked. Dane did not answer. The door reached half open, then fully open, and the room beyond did not look like a prison, a nursery, or even a medical bay. It looked like a shrine built by men who confused obsession with science. Glass partitions, recording lights, observation chairs bolted behind one-way panels, steel cots set in exact alignment, and along the far wall, a sequence of large backlit photographs running from left to right in careful clinical order. Everyone showed Logan. Different ages, different hair lengths, different uniforms, different scars. Some he recognized, some he did not. In one he was maybe 20, standing beside Ranger in a training lane he had never seen. In another, he was bloodied and shirtless in a medical room, staring at a camera with fresh stitches under the chin. In a third, he was holding a child whose face had been blacked out. Calder saw where Logan was looking and whispered, "That's the room where they decide who belongs to who." Mira made a tiny broken sound. Dane stepped around Logan and put the stolen carbine toward the room, not firing, just clearing angles the way men do when they already know they are too late for whatever truth waits inside. "No one touch anything," he said. Logan barely heard him. The backlit photos ended at a steel table under a suspended monitor. On the table sat 4 binders, 1 sealed metal case, and a child's blanket folded with ceremonial neatness beside a tagged collar. Black webbing, working harness cut, serial number plate worn smooth by years of hands. Ranger saw it too. The shepherd let out a low sound Logan had never heard before. Not a growl, not a whine, but grief shaped like recognition. He left Calder's side for the first time since the second door opened and crossed to the table in 3 slow steps, nose trembling as he breathed over the collar. Logan followed. The serial plate caught the overhead light. K9 Unit R17. Logan's mouth went dry. He had adopted Ranger under a different designation after a post-mission dispersal order. That was what the paperwork had said. Ranger had already been renamed twice by the time Logan got him. The file called it normal reassignment after handler loss. But R17 was not reassignment shorthand. It was origin inventory. Calder watched the dog and spoke without looking at Logan. "They told me he was the only one that kept passing the bond test." "Bond test?" Logan asked. Calder nodded once. "If the dog stayed after the sound, after the blood, after the separation, then the handler line stayed viable." Logan turned so fast the pain in his shoulder flared white. "Handler line?" Dane answered this time. "They weren't breeding soldiers. They were breeding loyalty." Silence hit so hard the hum of the vent seemed suddenly violent. Logan looked at the pictures again. At the blanket. At the collar. At the blacked-out child face in the photo. At Calder. Then he saw the monitor above the steel table had already woken. One live camera showed the buried container chamber they had just left, now empty except for 2 dead operators and drifting sedative gas. A second showed the upper shaft cap sealed shut. A third displayed the dry well from above, early morning light spreading over stone. And in the fourth frame, the well rim. The scrub beyond it. 3 black SUVs arriving from the service road. More teams. The loss hit before the logic did. Even if they fought through this level, even if the tunnel offered some route out, the surface was already owned. No truck. No open road. No simple climb back into the world. Rachel, the children, the hidden branches below, Ranger, the whole impossible truth, everything had been contained before Logan ever looked down the well. Mira saw the same screen and went pale. "There were never only recovery teams." "No," Dane said. "There never are when a root line activates." Root line again. Logan stepped to the metal case on the table and looked at Dane. "Open it." Dane hesitated. Logan's voice flattened. "Open it." Before Dane could move, The overhead speaker came alive with Dr. Mara Vale's voice again. "You are standing in an archival adjudication room, Logan. Opening sealed material without supervisory authorization will trigger reclassification." Calder laughed once. It was the saddest sound in the room because it came from a child who already knew exactly how empty the threat was. Everything triggers reclassification. Mira shut her eyes. Dane ripped the latches. The metal case opened. Inside were not weapons, not sedatives, not biometric tools. Photographs. Hundreds of them, stacked in ordered bundles with date tabs, bloodline labels, and branch codes. Dane grabbed the top bundle and spread the first few across the steel table. Logan saw his own face first. Younger, drugged, sitting in a chair under white lights. Then Ranger, muzzled and restrained in a parallel frame. Then another photo. Logan again, but with no beard, longer hair, and no scar yet under the chin. Too young for any mission he remembered. Then another. A little boy, no older than 5, standing beside an older military dog. Hand on harness. Face unmistakably his. He felt his knees threaten. No. Dane turned over the next photograph. A woman holding the same boy in front of a cinderblock building. The woman's face was stamped void in red. The boy's was not. Calder looked away before Logan could. Mira whispered, "I'm sorry." "For what?" She took too long to answer. "For learning your face before I learned my own." That line broke something quieter in him than rage and more dangerous. The monitor above the table chimed. Text replaced the well camera feed. Archival room breach accepted root material exposure logged primary emotional volatility rising. Dane swore. It's reading him in real time. The sedative concentration was increasing. Ivy sagged against the wall. Mira caught her before she slid all the way down. Calder remained on his feet only by locking one hand around the bed rail until the knuckles whitened. The child had learned how to fight drugs by stillness. That fact alone was enough to make Logan want to burn the room down. Ranger sneezed once, shook his head, then pressed his muzzle under Logan's hand. Alive. It steadied him for exactly one breath. Then the final bundle of photographs slid loose from the case and spilled across the table. One turned over face up. A hospital bassinet. 2 newborns. Same date stamp. Different tags. Cross, Logan M. Branch Calder 1. Every living person in the room saw it at once. Mira stopped breathing. Dane went still. Calder's face emptied completely. Logan stared until the letters blurred. Not a coincidence. Not just resemblance. Not just Branch. The child in this room had not been built from him later. He had been built beside him first. Calder spoke without any inflection at all, the way children do when shock has already lived too long in them. I told you, he said. They kept the original pair. The words landed and settled like ash. Logan looked at him. At the photo. At Ranger. At himself as a child in pictures he had never known existed. Pair, he said. Calder nodded. You and the dog. No one said anything after that. Then the room lights changed from white to red. Not alarm red. Decision red. A new line of text filled the monitor. Duplicate root conflict detected. Resolve forward lineage behind the red light. Even the air felt weighed and judged, as if the room itself had already chosen sides. Dane's face went hard in a way Logan had not yet seen. We need to move. Mira looked at the corridor door they had come through. Back where? Dane turned toward a second exit panel Logan hadn't noticed behind the observation chairs. There's always a purge route. The speaker clicked one final time before he could reach it. Correct, Mara said. Then her voice dropped to something almost human. But only one route is allowed through. And somewhere on the other side of the wall, Heavy locks began to close. The heavy locks began to close with a slow mechanical certainty that made the archival room feel smaller by the second. One slammed in the corridor they had come through. Another sealed somewhere behind the observation glass. A third dropped beneath the floor itself. Ranger growled low and pressed harder against Logan's thigh. The dog had felt it before anyone else had. Not danger. Selection. Dane crossed the room in 3 fast steps and hit the hidden exit panel behind the observation chairs. The panel didn't move. He tore the cover off, exposing dead switches and one biometric plate glowing red beneath security wire. "Purge route's keyed," he said. Mira still held Ivy upright against the wall. The girl's legs had mostly stopped cooperating under the sedative and rising panic, but her eyes were wide and awake. She looked at the red plate and whispered, "It won't take all of you." The room speaker clicked. "Correct," Dr. Maravale said. "Forward lineage conflict requires adjudication." Calder did not look surprised. That frightened Logan more than the locks had. He turned toward the boy. "You knew." Calder met his stare with the resigned calm of a child who had survived too much by learning not to waste energy on denial. "I knew there were only ever supposed to be 2 endings." "Which 2? Either you came back and replaced me." "A beat. Or I stayed and proved you were unnecessary." Silence hit the room like a blast wave. Even Dane stopped moving. Myra's face crumpled. "Calder." The boy didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Logan. "They wrote both versions before either of us got old enough to choose one." Ranger stepped away from Logan then. Only 1 pace. But it felt enormous. The shepherd crossed the room slowly and stopped in front of Calder. The child's lower lip trembled once. Ranger raised his muzzle, inhaled at the boy's throat, cheek, and hairline, then made the same low grieving sound he had made over the old harness on the table. Recognition. Logan felt something open inside him that had spent years pretending it was scar tissue. "You knew him first," he said to the dog. Ranger looked back once, eyes shining in the red light, then returned to Calder and pressed his head against the boy's chest. Calder finally broke. Not loudly. Just one strangled intake of breath as both hands came down into the dog's neck fur like he had been trying to survive without touch for far too long. Mira turned away and covered her mouth. Dane stared at Logan with disbelief. "Jesus Christ!" The speaker crackled again. "Archive note," Mara said. "Canine pair validation complete." Logan's head snapped toward the ceiling. "You built this around a dog." "No," she said. "Around what the dog proved." The red monitor over the steel table changed. The photos vanished. New lines of text flooded in. Root conflict active surface subject. Cross, Logan M. Archive subject. Calder 1 canine pair memory confirmed forward lineage resolution required. Logan read the first 2 lines twice before the meaning stabbed all the way through. Surface subject. Archive subject. Not father and son. Not branch and backup. Parallel. He looked from the monitor to Calder. "How old are you?" Calder wiped at his face without letting go of Ranger. "Same as you were supposed to be." "That's not an answer." "It is here." Dane found his voice first. "Say it plainly." Calder did not answer. Mara did. "Logan Cross was never a recovery adult," she said. "He was a release condition." The words hit the room and hung there. Logan actually laughed once. "You're going to have to do better than that." Mara's voice came softer now. "You and Calder are not father and son. You are not brothers. You are the same original line split into 2 developmental paths after canine retention divergence." Mira slid slowly down the wall to sit on the floor beside Ivy. Dane cursed under his breath. Logan stared at the speaker grill like it might crack open under refusal. "No," The monitor responded, as if denial itself were just another input. Root duplication verified primary memory partition event. Age 6 release track. Cross retention track. Calder every nerve in Logan's body seemed to turn to wire. Age 6. A flood of broken images hit him with no warning. A concrete room that smelled like wet bleach. A black harness on a steel hook. A woman's hand gripping his face and saying, "Keep the dog in your eyes." A little boy crying on the other side of glass. His own voice or someone else's yelling, because at 6, they had still sounded almost the same. Then white light. Then nothing. Then years of believing the gaps were just childhood damage and military trauma stacked wrong. Ranger whined again. Calder looked up at Logan through wet eyes. "They took your side outside." "Your side?" Logan repeated. Calder nodded once. "My side stayed." Mira let out a shaking breath. "They partitioned the line." Dane looked at her sharply. "You knew?" "No." Her voice cracked. "I knew they grew branches. I didn't know they ever split one child in real time." Logan's stomach turned over. He looked at Calder and saw it now. Not resemblance, but the tiny thing's memory doesn't fake. The way the boy's left shoulder sat slightly higher when scared. The scar under the brow. The habit of pressing the tongue once against the back molars before speaking. Logan had done that his whole life and never known where it came from. The speaker clicked. Elias called it twin path resilience. Mara said. One branch exposed to open-world unpredictability. One branch retained under controlled pressure. The same dogline bonded across both to measure memory persistence. Ranger lifted his head from Calder and looked at Logan again. The dog's eyes were full of ache, as if he had been trying to keep faith with something impossible for so long that seeing both halves in the same room had become its own wound. Logan took one step backward. Every instinct in him wanted to break the monitors, shoot the speaker, tear the room apart until the lies stopped sounding organized. But the major reveal had already landed. He had not been brought back to the archive because he shared a bloodline with what was buried here. He was what had been buried here. The half they released. Calder was the half they kept. The room speaker softened again. And now, Mara said, the archive needs to know which environment produced the stronger root. Dane seized the steel table and flipped it on its side for cover. That's the adjudication. Mira pulled Ivy behind the overturned frame. Calder went pale. Ranger stepped forward, placing himself exactly between Logan and the center of the room, as if the dog already understood the test better than any human here. The hidden exit panel flashed. A new prompt spread across the red biometric plate. Select forward root surface / archive 1 may exit 1 remains property no one breathed. Calder read it and looked down. Not surprised. Just tired. I told you, he said quietly. Only 2 endings. Logan looked at him, really looked, and saw a child built from his own missing years standing in the place history had buried him alive. Same fear. Same posture. Same line of the mouth when forcing courage, because no adult in the room had earned his trust enough to borrow it. Something inside Logan settled. Not peace. Direction. He looked at Dane. How many rounds? Not enough. He looked at Mira. Can Ivy run? Not far. He looked at the exit plate, then at the observation glass, then at the ceiling vents, then at Ranger. The dog had already chosen. Ranger stood between both roots, refusing the machine's geometry with his whole body. That was the answer. Logan raised the pistol and fired into the biometric plate. The corridor speaker screamed in feedback. Sparks erupted. The red prompt vanished. Mara's voice came back with open emotion under it. No! Dane grinned. That works. Because the moment the plate died, the observation glass on the far wall went transparent. A woman stood behind it. Not a recording. Not a silhouette. Real. Dark hair slicked back. Gray archive coat. Pale face. Logan's eyes. Dr. Mara Vale herself. She was looking at him like she was staring at a ghost that had dared to survive outside the equation. Then her gaze shifted to Calder. And whatever she felt at that sight hit her hard enough that one hand actually braced against the glass. Logan released. Calder retained. Mara converted. And somewhere behind the glass, the woman who had been running the system looked at Ranger touching Calder and realized the one thing Elias had failed to program out of any of them. Memory. The alarms changed pitch. Dane's smile vanished. Because Mara straightened, touched 2 fingers to the security panel beside her, and the room lights cut from red to black. Then steel shutters began falling inside the room itself. Again, the lights cut to black so completely it felt like the room had been swallowed. Then the steel shutters started falling. Not one wall. Multiple interior barriers slammed down inside the adjudication chamber, turning one sealed room into smaller killing compartments. Logan heard the first shutter crash between the overturned table and the observation glass. The second hit near the service hatch. A third dropped from the ceiling rails directly behind Mira and Ivy. Ranger barked once, short, explosive, urgent. The dog launched through the dark before any human eyes adjusted. Logan heard claws hit steel, then a body colliding hard with one falling shutter just before it fully locked. The impact changed the angle by inches. Not enough to stop it. Enough to leave a narrow gap at the bottom where white sparks spat from the track. Then emergency lights came on. Not the old cold white of the archive. These were low red strips near the floor, slicing the darkness into bands and making every face look blood-marked. Logan found Calder first, crouched low with both hands over Ranger's neck fur. Mira had Ivy pressed under the lip of the overturned table. Dane had rolled toward the ruined biometric plate and was already firing blind at movement behind the transparent glass. The panel space where she had stood on the far side of the observation wall was empty now. Then the speaker came alive from everywhere at once. "Containment revision," Mara said, breath tighter now. "Forward root conflict unresolved. Physical stress adjudication authorized." Dane looked up sharply. "She just armed the room." As if the chamber had waited for that line, hatches in the wall snapped open. 4 drone ports. 2 dart apertures. One floor seam Logan had mistaken for drainage. The first darts came fast and low. He threw himself left, dragging Calder with him, and heard the needles punch into the metal case on the floor where the files had spilled. Ranger snapped at one out of the air, and broke it before the syringe could unload. Another struck the overturned table above Ivy's head, and his sedative missed through a cracked ampoule. Mira shouted, "Cloth! Cover your mouths!" Logan ripped the sleeve off one dead operator's jacket and shoved it into Calder's hands. "Use it!" The boy did without arguing. That frightened Logan too. Archive children obeyed because refusal had probably been trained out of them before they learned how to lie. The floor seam opened. Black water punched upward through the crack, flooding the lower half of the chamber and striking the legs out from under the table. Ivy screamed. Mira caught her before her head hit steel. Dane kicked the table back into a braced angle and shouted over the rush, "It's routing wet room overflow in here." The room was becoming a test. Drug exposure, flood stress, compartment isolation, moving barriers. The archive wasn't just choosing between him and Calder anymore. It was measuring how each half responded under live pressure. The shepherd jerked toward the ceiling corner and barked twice. Logan followed the line in time to see a small lens slide open from the track housing above the service hatch. Not just camera. Weapon mount. He fired upward and shattered it an instant before a micro-turret deployed. The broken unit sparked, dumped one wild burst into the ceiling, and died. Calder stared at him. "You saw that too fast." Logan almost answered honestly. "No, the dog saw it." Instead he said, "Move when Ranger moves." Another shutter slammed down at the far side of the room, sealing the observation glass wall completely. Any chance of seeing Mara directly was gone. Her voice stayed with them anyway. "I told Elias the retained branch learned pattern faster," she said. "But he preferred the one who disappeared into weather." Calder flinched. Logan didn't. Dane spat blood onto the floor. "You keep saying branch like that makes this science." For the first time, anger sharpened Mara's voice. "What would you prefer I call children carved in half by men who thought loyalty could be inherited?" Mira looked up into the red dark. "Then stop finishing his work." A pause. Then the next phase started. The vents opened wider, and a low tone began pulsing through the floor. Not loud enough to deafen. Low enough to unsettle balance. Ivy clamped both hands over her ears. Calder swayed. Ranger growled into the vibration like he could feel it in his spine. Dane recognized it first. "Conditioning frequency." Logan turned. "Meaning?" "It's a compliance tone," Dane said. "Some subjects panic. Some freeze. Some follow the strongest familiar signal in the room." Logan's eyes went to Calder. Then to Ranger. Too late. The boy had already shifted closer to the dog because old Barry training in his body had responded first. Ranger moved instantly, planting himself between Calder and the nearest dart port while keeping one shoulder aimed toward Logan too. The dog was splitting himself to guard both halves at once. Mara heard the movement through cameras or biosensors. "Interesting," she said softly. "The pair refuses adjudication." Logan shouted at the ceiling. "Then stop the room." "No." The answer came too quickly. Too human. "Sister." "If I stop it," she said, "he wins again." The floodwater reached ankle height. A new port opened near Mira and Ivy. Dane dove through the rising water, jammed his forearm into the aperture, and took the dart burst into muscle instead of letting it hit the women. He grunted once and ripped the port cover free. One dart still got through. It buried itself high in Myra's side. She went still. Not collapsed. Still. Logan saw it. So did Ivy. "No!" Ivy clawed at the dart, but Mira caught her wrist hard. "Don't break it." Her words were already slurring. Logan crossed the water in 2 strides, grabbed the shaft of the injector, and yanked it clean while Dane covered the ports with the dead operator's body armor plate. Mira nearly blacked out at the sudden shock. Ivy held her upright with both arms even though the girl was too small to manage the weight. Calder looked at Logan through the red light. "She's choosing who breaks first." Logan looked at him, at Mira, at Dane shivering from his own dart exposure, at Ivy trying not to cry, at Ranger refusing the machine's geometry. Then the far shutter rose 6 inches. Not enough to escape. Enough to show a pair of legs beyond it. Combat boots. Dark trousers. A slow measured step. Not Mara. Elias Vale. He wasn't entering the room. He was watching through the gap like a man inspecting an experiment from the exact distance safety required. One hand rested behind his back. The other held a slim steel control wand. The red light turned his face into an older, colder version of the same bone lines Logan had spent the last hour learning to fear in himself. The old man smiled without warmth. "There you are," Elias said. Ranger erupted. The shepherd launched through the water at the half-raised shutter, so hard his shoulders slammed the steel with a booming crack. The gap wasn't large enough for him to pass. It was large enough for his teeth to find Elias's sleeve before the old man stepped back out of range. Elias didn't flinch. He just looked down at the dog with detached curiosity and said, "Still choosing the unstable half. Remarkable." That detonated something in Logan. He fired through the gap. The round hit the floor near Elias's boot and blew chips across his trouser leg. Elias retreated fully out of sight. The shutters slammed back down. Mara's voice came sharp and furious. "You weren't supposed to be here." His reply came through a second channel, live and close enough that all of them heard the family shape inside it. "You were taking too long." The room shook. Not from flood now. From machinery beneath. Dane's face drained. "No!" Logan rounded on him. "What?" Dane looked at the water covering the floor seam. "He's moving the chamber." The answer came 1 second later, when the whole adjudication room lurched sideways on hidden tracks. Ivy screamed. Mira lost consciousness and fell against the table leg. Calder slammed into Logan's chest. Ranger skidded through black water and barely kept his footing. It was being transferred. Mara shouted through the speakers, not at them this time, but at her father. "If you move this room to the lower spine, the retained branches die." Elias answered with calm disgust. "Then the wrong route was always going to cost too much." The room lurched again, harder, beginning to slide into whatever waited deeper beneath the archive. And one of the ceiling locks above them released with a heavy click. Then another. Then the entire roof assembly started to open to the shaft above. Logan looked at Calder, at the unconscious Mira, at Ivy barely holding her together, at Dane fighting Dartshake and Flood, at Ranger, who had already chosen them all. Then he heard a new sound above the opening roof. Rotor blades. The drop team was already descending. Below, Logan looked up through the opening roof just as the first black rope dropped into view. Rotor washed thunder down the shaft, flattening vapor, whipping floodwater across the steel floor and bending Ranger's ears flat against his skull. The chamber was still sliding sideways deeper into the archive when the drop team began descending, silhouettes in harnesses and helmets cutting through the red light. Not recovery operators. Something cleaner. Faster. Built for extraction. Too clean. Too close. Late. Mara heard the rotor wash through the internal comms. "No," she said. Elias answered at once, somewhere beyond the sealed shutter. "You lost the room." The first operator hit the opening roof hard, boots striking the frame with a metallic crack. He dropped half inside, rifle already tracking the flood, then froze for one impossible beat when he saw the room moving under him. Logan fired first. The shot shattered the man's visor and threw him backward into open air. His body vanished up into rotor wash. Two more descended instantly to replace him. Ranger launched through the flood and hit the nearest one before the man fully cleared the rope. Teeth found forearm. The operator slammed sideways into the roof frame. Dane ripped the dropped sidearm from Myra's unconscious grip and put 2 rounds through the second man's thigh, sending him spinning into the half-open ceiling track. The chamber lurched again. Logan felt the movement under his boots change from lateral slide to downward drop, as if the room had reached the lower spine and was now being lowered into a deeper cradle. The rotor above struggled to maintain position over a moving target. That bought them seconds. Calder shouted over the noise. "The roof won't stay open." Logan looked up. He was right. The ceiling assembly had opened in 4 retracting plates, but one had already begun stuttering back inward, trying to complete the seal despite the ropes and the men dropping through it. The archive was fighting its own override. Near escape flashed in front of him all at once. Open roof. External aircraft. County responder somewhere above ground. For one heartbeat, the whole thing looked breakable. Then the twist announced itself in the ugliest way possible. A woman's voice came over the rotor external speaker. Calm. Official. Not Mara. not Elias. Guardian 3, primary juvenile confirmed on thermal. Repeat, your live priority is Jonah Mercer. All other human assets secondary. Logan went cold. Not him. Not Calder. Not the files. Jonah. Even here, in a room already sinking below the archive, the machine had not stopped chasing the boy. Mara heard it too. For the first time since Logan had heard her voice, she sounded truly panicked. They called an outside Guardian team. Dane looked at Logan through red light and spray. That's worse than recovery. Why? Because recovery serves the site. Dane's mouth went tight. Guardians serve the bloodline. Ranger came off the operator's arm and spun toward Logan, reading the change in him before the rest of the room caught up. Ivy was crying openly now, one hand on Myra's shoulder, the other gripping the table leg. Calder heard the name Jonah, and went still in a way children only do when they realize some distant disaster has already chosen its road. The roof plate above them slammed halfway shut, severing one rope. A descending operator fell screaming past the opening and hit the flood with a sound no one acknowledged. Logan moved. He grabbed Calder by the front of the shirt, shoved him toward Ivy and Mira, and shouted at Dane. Can that shutter open? Dane knew which one he meant. The one Elias had been watching through. Maybe. Do it. Dane waded through black water to the service side panel and smashed the shock batten into the emergency release housing. Sparks burst. The half-room divider near the observation wall jutted once and rose 6 inches. Not enough for a body. Enough for a hand. Enough for sight. Through the slit, Logan saw Elias again. The old man stood in the dry outer passage with the steel control wand still in one hand and 2 armored Guardian operators behind him. Their gear was different from recovery, lighter, cleaner, no visible insignia, white slash marks painted on the face shields. One held a compact child restraint harness. Elias looked down through the slit and smiled. You see, he said, the room clarifies purpose. Logan shot through the gap. The round missed Elias by inches and sparked off the corridor wall, but the old man's smile vanished. One Guardian operator dropped low. The other raised his weapon and fired a netted charge through the slit. Logan ducked. The weighted mesh spread across the room, hit the flood, and began discharging current through the black water. Ivy screamed. Calder jerked sideways. Ranger barked and leaped to the overturned table to keep his paws off the conductive surface. Logan hauled Mira fully onto the steel cot frame just before the shock surge reached where she had fallen. Dane slammed the emergency plate again, and this time the divider shutter shot higher by another foot. Enough for Logan to see the real horror in the outer corridor beyond him. Children. Not one. A line of them. Gray shirts. Black wristbands. 2 older, 3 younger, 1 barely steady on his feet. All of them restrained to a moving transfer rail behind shields. The Guardians were not here only for Jonah. They were already moving branches out. Calder saw them too and whispered. They emptied the east rooms. The room speaker cracked with static, then Mara's voice forced its way back in. Logan, listen to me. Her breathing sounded wrong now, closer to crying than speech. If the Guardian team reaches the surface with Jonah, Elias keeps legal custody of the line. Not physical. On paper. Forever. The roof plates pressed harder against the ropes. Rotor wash thinned. Either the aircraft was losing hover position or being forced off. The chance of going up was disappearing by the second. Failure brushed him again. But the one person the archive truly wanted was not here. Jonah was still above. Still in county hands. Still the cleanest prize on the board. And now a Guardian team was moving to collect him. Logan felt the shape of the choice arrive. Stay and finish the truth. or get back to the surface before the boy became property in daylight. Ranger made the choice first. The dog dropped from the cot to the dry lip of the moving shutter track, sprinted through the 6-inch high slit as if bones and steel meant nothing, and hit a guardian at the knee. The operator went down hard, losing the harness. Logan saw the opening and moved. He dove through the rising gap shoulder first, tearing skin from both arms on metal edges, hit the outer corridor roll side, came up with the pistol, and shot the second guardian through the visor seam before the man could clear the harness. Elias swung the control wand like a baton. Logan caught the old man's wrist, slammed it into the wall, and heard bone crack. The wand dropped into the flood running under the threshold. Dane was through the gap next, dragging Ivy and half-carrying Mira. Calder came after, with the dead operator's sidearm, and Ranger glued to his hip. For one dangerous heartbeat, it looked like they had broken the room after all. They had the corridor. They had the children in sight. Elias was down. The way forward had appeared. The chamber behind the slit slammed lower again, nearly sealing Mira and Ivy off from the corridor. Dane caught the descending edge with the armor plate and held it on pure shaking force. "If this drops," he shouted, "they drown in there." Calder threw himself to help him without waiting for permission. Ranger saw the two rooms separating and spun in panic, torn between Logan and the corridor, and the children still trapped inside the lowering chamber. Then the live feed took that illusion apart. Then the near-resolution twist arrived. The monitor built into the transfer rail lit up with a live external feed. County Rescue Yard. Red strobes. Collapsed well kept being cut open. Rachel on the ground under blankets. And Jonah, gone. Logan stopped breathing. The image updated. A gravel service road. Black SUV. Rear door open. Two Guardian operators were already loading Jonah inside. Rachel was screaming against responders holding her back. Micah was crying. No one understood what they were seeing until too late. Mara's voice came through the corridor speakers like a wound torn open. "No," she whispered. Elias, blood on his mouth and one hand ruined, looked up at Logan from the floor and smiled again, smaller now, but real. "You were always going to choose the wrong room first," he said. And over the service road feed, one of the Guardians shut the SUV door on Jonah and drove away. The SUV door slammed shut on Jonah, and something old and buried inside Logan went still. Not weaker. Not calmer. Still in the way a rifle barrel goes still just before the shot. The archive had spent the whole night trying to split him between rooms, children, and truths. So Logan stopped choosing the way it wanted. He seized Elias Vale by the coat, slammed him against the transfer rail, and drove the pistol under his jaw. "Open every route to the surface." Elias smiled through blood. "The Guardians are already beyond you." "Then open them anyway." Ranger planted one paw on Elias's leg. Mara's voice came through the corridor speakers, ragged now instead of clinical. "If he gives you transit, the site vents into county maps." "Good," Logan said. Behind him, the children were still locked to the rail. Dane and Calder were trying to keep the descending chamber divider from crushing Mira and Ivy. Dane shouted, "Logan!" He looked back. The divider slammed lower. Mira got Ivy under it. Calder shoved the last girl through. Then the steel dropped all the way and sealed the adjudication room forever. Containment had failed. Mara's voice came again, less machine than daughter now. "If Jonah leaves with a confirmed line record, Elias keeps custody of the branch on paper even if the building dies." Elias laughed weakly. "Paper is civilization." Logan hit the emergency strip built into the rail with a pistol and blew it apart. Sparks burst. Lockouts failed. The child restraints popped open all at once. For one beat, none of the children moved. Then Ranger barked once, loud and commanding. That did it. The line broke. Children stumbled free and rushed toward the nearest adult body that did not feel like the archive. Mira caught the first two. Dane took another. Calder held a limping girl and a younger boy. Ivy clung to Myra's sleeve. The floor shuddered harder. Mara heard it first. No! Dane's face emptied. Failed at purge? Yes! If the Guardian team exits with a live primary juvenile, Mara said, the deep archive wipes the rest. Logan looked up at the speaker grill. Can you stop it? No. But she kept talking. I can delay one gate. The west lift still answers emergency priority if the adjudication rail is broken. Route 9 crosses above it before the service switchback. That was enough. Dane, Logan said. Take them to the west lift. Dane saw the shape of it immediately. And you? I get Jonah. Mira started to protest, then looked at Calder, Ivy, and the younger children and swallowed it. There was no clean version left. Only motion before the water and charges reached them. Calder stepped toward Logan. His face was pale, wet, and still painfully his in ways Logan would spend the rest of his life learning to survive. You're coming back. Not a question. Logan crossed the corridor, caught the boy by both shoulders, and gave him the one truth the archive had spent years burying from both of them. You are not the kept half anymore. Something in Calder's mouth broke around the edges. Belief. Ranger stepped close and pressed against both their legs. Then the ceiling cracked and dust poured down. Time was over. Logan stripped the sidearm from Elias's ruined hand and shoved him toward the wall. Move! Elias stared. Why keep me alive? Because you don't get to die underground as the author. Mara's voice came once more. I'll stay long enough to burn the records. Elias laughed weakly. You always were mine. Mara's reply came like a blade. No. I was hers before you touched the file. Then every speaker died. Every ceiling light cut out. Only emergency arrows remained, pulsing west and north through darkness and floodwater. Dane moved first. Mira and Ivy followed. Calder gathered smaller hands into his sleeves and shirt and ran. The west lift doors waited open at the junction, humming on failing power. Logan turned the other way with Elias at gunpoint. Route 9. He had gone only 30 yards when he heard running feet behind him. Rachel. She came out of the dark against every order anyone had given her, wet hair plastered to her face, one county flashlight clipped to her belt. I'm coming! No, he's my son too! That ended the argument. The lower spine boomed behind them. Water hit the corridor floor from a burst pipe and ran black around their boots. Logan shoved Elias ahead, Rachel at his shoulder, and followed the emergency arrows toward the route crossover. The service switchback opened into a narrow vehicle tunnel sloping toward the old ridge road. Fresh tire marks cut the wet concrete. A second monitor hung over the ramp, flickering on backup power. It showed the switchback gate above ground and the black SUV idling on the far side. Two guardians stood outside. The rear door shook from inside. Jonah. Rachel made a sound between hope and pain. Logan ripped the manual override cover from the gate console. Locked. Elias smiled through blood. You are still one layer late. Logan slammed his face into the concrete wall. Open it! Rachel took the pistol from Logan's hand without asking and jammed it under Elias's ear. Do it! This time Elias looked at her. He expected pleading. He found a mother. Elias keyed the release. The steel barrier at the top of the ramp began to open. Too slowly. On the screen, one guardian turned toward the moving gate. Another opened the rear SUV door and grabbed Jonah by the harness. The boy fought with every piece of fear he had left, heels slamming the frame, hands clawing for anything but the black gloves holding him. Dad! The word tore through Logan. He ran. Up the ramp. Past the half-open barrier. Into rain and headlight glare. The nearest guardian raised his weapon. Rachel shot him from the ramp mouth before he could clear it. The second operator dragged Jonah halfway out of the SUV. Logan hit him at full speed. Not pretty. Just violent enough to change the world by one body width. They went down in the rain. Jonah tore free and scrambled backward across wet gravel. The guardian reached for the sidearm at his thigh. Ranger got there first. The shepherd came out of the tunnel like dawn with teeth. He hit the man high, took the wrist, and drove him into the wheel well until the pistol fell into the mud. Logan got to his feet, grabbed Jonah by the front of the shirt, and hauled him into his chest. "I've got you!" The boy latched on, with both arms, shaking so hard it felt electrical. "Don't let them take me back!" Rachel was already there, one hand on Jonah's head. Elias looked at the three of them in the rain, mother, father, child, and still reached for control. "You think this ends the line?" he asked. "No," Logan said. He looked down at Jonah, at Rachel, then back at the old man. "It ends your claim to it." The ridge shook. A deep rolling detonation rose out of the earth beneath the switchback. Dust and white vapor punched from hidden vents along the slope. County responders were arriving at the upper turn with flood lamps and deputies. Elias saw it and, for the first time, seemed smaller than his own work. Ranger left the downed guardian and came to Logan's side, blood on his fur, one limb visible now, but eyes clear. The dog looked at Jonah, then at Logan, as if asking whether the mission had finally been defined correctly. Logan knelt despite the pain in his ribs and pressed his forehead to Ranger's. "Yeah," he whispered. "We got him." Rachel heard it and broke at last. Not from weakness. From release. She wrapped both arms around Jonah and Logan together, while rain hammered the switchback and deputies rushed past toward Elias. When the West lift finally surfaced near the county perimeter minutes later, Dane came out first with two children in his arms, Mira behind him with Ivy, Calder after them with another boy on his back, and Mara last, burned, soaked, empty-eyed, but alive. She saw Jonah in Rachel's arms, and stopped like she'd been struck. Calder saw Logan and Ranger together, and exhaled for the first time since the archive had named him. It was this, Jonah alive. Calder above ground. Rachel and Mira breathing in the same air. Ivy no longer sedated. Mara outside the machine she had been raised inside. Dane still standing long enough to testify. Ranger choosing the family, not the file. And Logan no longer split between rooms. He looked at Calder. Opened one arm. The boy hesitated only a second, then crossed the mud and fit himself into the side of the embrace without asking what name it should have. Jonah stayed on the other side. One dog. Two boys. Rain. Dawn finally breaking over ruined ground. The archive had spent years trying to decide which line would move forward. In the end, it lost to a shepherd who barked at the dry well until the right man looked down. And for the first time since childhood, Logan did not feel partitioned, retained, or released. He felt whole. And under the rain-washed dawn, none of them belonged to the archive after this.